Thank you very much for coming to our event today. I'm J.D. Gordon, a senior fellow at the Center for a Secure Free Society. We hope to have the premier event discussing Western Hemisphere security. I see so many friends and colleagues from various parts of my life here. It's like a reunion, even including NHK from Japan, who I worked with 20 years ago when I was Navy spokesman in Japan. And so it's great to see people from around the world here today. Some of the highlights we have today: several members of Congress will be speaking today. Senator Cruz does send his regrets. He had a last-minute schedule change, so he does send his regrets to us. But we have a number of other members of Congress here. We have a former head of state from Latin America who'll be joining us later today. 3 former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Western Hemisphere here, colleagues there. I see some right now, which is great. So we have a great program for you today. One of the things I think, if you can take away from today's panels, we have 4 all-star panels on all aspects of Western Hemisphere security, from Canada down to Argentina and Chile, is that a lot of world powers throughout the last century have used Latin America as a staging ground to threaten the United States and to threaten our allies. If you go back to 103 years ago, actually 2 weeks ago, 103 years ago, there was a battle fought between the Germans and the British off the coast of Chile, called the Battle of Coronel, off of the Chilean central coast. I know that very well because my spouse is Chilean, Gisela, and so I've spent a lot of time with the Chilean Navy. And then the Germans, of course, we know about the Zimmermann cable too. During World War I, the Germans had attempted to get Mexico to attack the United States. Mexico didn't, fortunately, but the Germans used Latin America as a staging ground to threaten our allies and to attack us. They engaged in unrestricted submarine warfare, not just off the United States, but off of Brazil as well. So then fast forward to the Cold War. The Soviet Union was creating havoc throughout Latin America. We all know the Cuban Missile Crisis, of course, was the closest the world ever came to a nuclear war through the Soviet Union's influence in Latin America, through Cuba. But it wasn't just in Cuba. The Soviet Union was destabilizing the entire region. We had a number of wars throughout the 1980s in Central America, which Dr. Max Manwaring, one of our guests today, has written consistently about, and is one of the leading scholars on the wars in Central America in the 1980s. But that was very much backed by the Soviets. So the Soviets, during the Cold War, used Latin America as a staging ground to attack the United States, to attack our allies, and to attack liberty and freedom and the values that we are blessed to have. So fast forward to today. There are world powers and rising powers that are using Latin America as a specific threat to the United States and our allies. If you look at what's going on in Venezuela today, we have Iran that's been operating in Venezuela. If you see the chaos of the Maduro regime killing civilians, well, that has a direct correlation to Iran. If you look at what happened in 2009 in the Green Revolution, when the girl Neda was shot through the throat, marching through the streets for freedom in Iran, and she was killed by the besieged, the thugs that work for the Iranian regime. Well, those same Iranian thugs are training the colectivos in Venezuela to kill civilians there. So there's a direct tie. But there's also the Russians and the Chinese. The Russians are helping Venezuela with arms. The Chinese are helping Venezuela financially. So there are world powers that are not from Latin America, that are in Latin America, again, threatening the United States. And through the course of the 4 panels today, we want to expose that to the maximum extent possible. We're trying to get the word out as much as possible, and we appreciate you all coming today to hear what we have to say and to tell your friends and colleagues about it, that this is an area that needs a lot of attention. A lot of times in the United States and Washington, we focus on the Middle East, we focus on Asia, and I felt that we haven't focused enough attention on Latin America. I've spent a lot of years in Latin America. I was based in Puerto Rico for 3 years, and I was a Pentagon spokesman for 4 years as well, and focused quite extensively on Latin America as and Canada, as my colleagues will tell you. So with that, I think I'm going to introduce my colleague, Joseph Humeyer, who is the Executive Director of the Center for a Secure Free Society. SFS has been around since around 2005 or so as a program within Atlas Network, and our founder is here with us as well, Alejandro Chafuen. And Joseph was able to take SFS into an independent organization in 2012. So it's been independent since then. And with that, I would like to introduce Joseph.
Well, good morning. Buenos días. Todos los amigos de América Latina. First, I'll be very quick. You're going to see me throughout the parts of the day, and I just want to say thank you, first of all. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to the Daniel Morgan Graduate School for co-hosting this with us. Thank you to Alex, for having the vision to create this. I hope this is now realizing part of that vision. Thank you to the staff, and thank you most importantly to everybody, especially the guests that came from out of the country. It's a long way to come to Washington, but I'm very glad you came. We're going to have a lot of rich, full discussions. We're going to talk about everything from, as JD mentioned, from Canada to Argentina. But I hope within those discussions there's also private conversations that's going to allow you to make connections that last through time. That's what this is about. It's about building a network. And we're going to talk about that more and more as we get through the day. As JD mentioned, my name is Joseph Humeyer. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Secure Free Society. We are a relatively new national security think tank based here in Washington, but with a global footprint. I like to call us a next generation national security think tank because the way we approach some of these problems is a bit different than maybe traditional think tanks. We take much more of a bottom-up approach. Some of the individuals that are here with us today, for example, our esteemed colleague from Peru, Mr. Dardo Lopez, is a shining example of our approach to national security, which is not necessarily for folks here in Washington to analyze everything that's going on in the world and to go out and speak about the problems centered, from a Washington perspective. Matter of fact, we partner with individuals such as Dardo, who is our international fellow, to let us know about what's going on in their countries, Peru, Colombia, Chile, Canada, and take that input, contextualize it, and put it to the policymakers so that we have a more real-time assessment of international affairs and national security threats. So the Western Hemisphere, unfortunately, Senator Cruz wasn't able to join us, which obviously I'm a little bit saddened by that because I think his speech was going to be very rich about why the Western Hemisphere is important. Often, I think, the Western Hemisphere gets overlooked. I mean, all of you perhaps pay attention more than most, but generally, the Western Hemisphere is usually the last page on the newspaper or the final thought in a conversation, and oftentimes doesn't get the treatment it deserves here in Washington. It's been often referred to as perhaps a backwater of foreign policy and national security. I've heard esteemed colleagues from the Defense Department and the intelligence community, others have told me, Joseph, we understand that there's a lot of headaches in Latin America, but there's migraines in the Middle East, and there's real fires that we're putting out in other parts of the world. And I'd just like to remind everybody, especially in the national security community, that headaches turn to migraines if they're left untreated or unattended. So today, we hope to begin to change that. This is just the first of an annual forum that we hope to continue to do throughout the years, where we give the Western Hemisphere its importance, its attention, and the level of conversation that we want to take it to another level here in the policy world. We have guests amongst us from Peru, Guatemala, Argentina, Colombia, Panama, and Brazil, as well as leading opposition members from Bolivia and Venezuela, representatives of the Department of Defense, the National Security Council, the White House, Department of Treasury, as well as other elements of the U.S. government, representatives of Congress, and their staff. I'm very proud of the group that we brought together. I hope that you have as much, take away as much from this conference as we put together, and most importantly, just relax and have fun. We're going to have 8 hours together, and I think we're going to be able to talk, even the topics that we don't get to touch on the stage, we'll be able to touch on them through side conversations. So you'll see me throughout the day. Feel free to approach me at any time. I'd be happy to talk to you, to welcome you, answer your questions, and welcome you as part of our network. And with that, I'd like to introduce really the man that had the vision for this and who actually allowed me and empowered me to be able to do this on a full-time basis. They say that if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. So I've been very privileged to be able to do what I love on a day-to-day basis. And so it doesn't feel like work, even though sometimes it does feel much more like work. That said, Alex Chafuen, for those that do know him, probably know him most as a champion of freedom, someone that's promoted freedom for a distinguished career of over 25 years. but mostly within the economic realm. He is the president of a group called the Atlas Economic Research Foundation. The network that the Atlas Network, a very powerful network that they promote, is mainly economists that are promoting economic policies in different countries around the world. But Alex had a very big vision, and I think it crystallized in 2001, and we can all guess why, that if you're not dealing with national security or defense, then you're really not complete in your vision of promoting a free society. That economic freedom, political freedom, and strong national security go hand in hand. These are the elements and the pillars of a free society. And so Alex had this vision. He created this as a program within Atlas in 2004. We spun it off into an independent think tank in 2012. And I'm more than privileged and welcome to have him with us today. And Alex, join me on the stage for some opening remarks.
Joseph used the analogy of a headache, of a migraine. I use the analogy of cancer. All of you know a small little tumor, you leave it untreated, and it metastasizes. And then, my gosh, then you have an issue. Atlas was founded by an Englishman who, very young, had his dad was killed by a sniper in Gaza. He became very entrepreneurial, and with his brother, they started renting cars and renting a plane. But when the war started, they volunteered to the Royal Air Force, and his brother, only brother, was killed in the Battle of Britain. I think that impacted greatly Anthony Fisher to get involved in the battle of ideas. He was banned from flying because I think he was going to be careless. So he devoted all his entrepreneurial skills to design the first shooting sort of arcade-type machine to teach people how to shoot more accurately the enemy planes. He used to also use economic incentives because to encourage people not to, how you say, pilots were faking their effectiveness, by shooting against the water. So he devised a way to create incentives so they would really be fighting against the enemy. But long story short, Anthony tried to stop the growth of communism and National Socialism, decided to focus on economics outside political fields, but he didn't focus on defense. Basically, England already had several think tanks focusing on defense, but he was very, very open to work in this area. And after 1989, a lot of people forgot this lesson, that the free market is nothing but the free movement of goods, capital, and labor across borders, correct? And if those areas are not protected, they can be used by the enemy to infiltrate, to support terrorists, to the same freedom, to move across borders or smuggle a little refrigerator can be used to smuggle a small shoulder missile, so you have to be careful about that. And also, on the other hand, some of those threats can be used to increase protectionism, to close the economy because we cannot afford having free trade. So we started working in this area, and for me it was a tremendous privilege to find Joseph Heumeyer. At the turn of the century, I saw some of my friends, Chicago boy economists, becoming ministers of defense in Italy, in Argentina, some heads of intelligence. I said, why are these worlds getting together? And I realized, the overlap that existed in these two fields. So I had this vision. I consulted with the stakeholders and some of our generous supporters, like now the Daniel Morgan Graduate School of National Security, and the SCAPE Foundation and others encouraged us to continue with this work. And I will finish up with saying, I'm also now president of the Philadelphia Society, founded in 1964, and we live by the dream of the United States. And the dream is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The only way that that dream can come true is if we have protection against internal and external attacks against our life, our liberty, and our pursuit of happiness with our own property. Because pursuing happiness with the property of others is what inspired communism and led to more than 100 million deaths. And again, a privilege to have you with us, incredible amount of friends, and I'm looking forward to learn from you guys who know much more about defense than I do. So thank you, and let's enjoy this day of outstanding programs and speakers. Thank you.
co-host and co-sponsor today is the Daniel Morgan Graduate School. And with that, I would like to introduce Frank Fletcher, who's been a great friend of ours and a great supporter. Joseph, Frank, and I and our colleagues have been working on this event for the whole year. So it's great to see it come to fruition, and I would like to introduce Frank Fletcher.
Good morning. On behalf of Daniel Morgan Graduate School, I'd like to welcome you to today's event. Our school was founded in 2014 to educate and prepare future leaders to develop actionable solutions to global and domestic security challenges. The foundation of that are our scholar practitioners. You will find today that that principle is at work here in this conference. Scholars and people who practice what they're going to talk about. We're very grateful to the Diana Davis Spencer Foundation, without whose support we would not exist. And the chair of our Board of Trustees, Abby Moffett, is the CEO of the Diana Davis Spencer Foundation. So we're very grateful to them and to the Center for Secure Free Society. Thank you.